Good evening, everyone. Welcome to Cooking with Plants. Tonight, we are going to be focused on some plant-forward makeovers of some family favorite recipes that you all submitted. So thank you so much to those of you who submitted the recipes. Hopefully, you're excited by what we're going to cover tonight. For those of you who haven't been with us, I'm Kelly Wilson. I am a lifestyle medicine board certified registered dietitian. If you're not familiar with lifestyle medicine, it's this medical subspecialty that uses evidence-based therapeutic treatments in 6 pillars to prevent, treat, and reverse chronic illness. Those 6 pillars are a whole food, plant-forward dietary pattern, which is what we cover in this class. We also talk to our patients about moving their bodies daily, getting restorative sleep, managing stress, avoiding risky substances, and connecting with other humans and the natural world. So those 6 pillars make up the foundation of lifestyle medicine. And what we do in our practice here at Trinity Health is help our patients in each of those 6 pillar areas so they can achieve whole health and prevent, reverse, and treat chronic illness. Tonight, we're focused on that whole food, plant-forward pillar, like I said, and that's what we focus on in this whole series. And I'm so excited to be teaching this series because our goal is to break down culinary basics and make it really easy for you to put plant-forward foods on your plate. And we're going to talk a little bit about why those are important tonight. I firmly believe that anybody can cook, and you don't have to have fancy kitchen equipment. You don't have to go to culinary school in order to make really delicious meals at home. And that food does not have to be expensive either. We can make really budget-friendly, tasty meals. If you are here because you're looking to add more plants to your plate and this is a new journey for you, I want to encourage you to start small. I think a lot of what we're going to talk about tonight could help you in taking some first initial steps, and then be persistent and patient with yourself. Give yourself grace. Be kind to yourself. Know that you aren't going to be perfect 100% of the time, but as long as you're persistent with whatever small goal that you set, you will see some positive change. If you want closed captions, go ahead and look for the 3 dots at the top right of your screen where it says more, select language and speech, then you can turn on live captions. If you have a question, unfortunately everyone is muted, but that's not because I don't want you to engage and ask questions. If you drop a question in that Q&A box, I will do my best to keep checking that throughout the class and then answer any questions that pop up there. I ask that if you do put a question there, please make it relevant to what we're talking about in class tonight, an ingredient, a technique, something like that. And if you have a specific question that's maybe outside of tonight's class topic, you're always welcome to email us at lifestylemedicine@trinity-health.org. And I'm happy to respond to you there. If you put a question in the Q&A and I miss it or don't get to it, you can also send it to that email address and I'll make sure to respond. If you are a Trinity Health colleague, welcome. Thanks for joining us. You get 250 Live Your Whole Life points towards keeping your insurance premiums low for every class that you watch live or recorded. So all you need to do to get those points is email that lifestylemedicine@trinity-health.org email address, and we will get you those codes for those points. This is our halfway point for this series this year, if you can believe it. I don't know about you, but June really snuck up on me. And you can see all of the topics that we've covered in previous months on this slide, and you can see where we're going. If you were forwarded this invite and you aren't registered for the full series, you can scan that QR code and that'll take you to the registration page to make sure that you get the reminder emails and links for all of our future classes, as well as the class website where we have all of our recordings from our past classes. So like I said, tonight we are going to focus on kind of plantifying our family favorite meals. We're going to talk first a little bit about why we might want to add some more plant foods to our plates, strategies to maximize plants in our meals, and then we're going to cook through 3 recipes. We're going to do 2 different, actually 4 recipes, because we're going to do 2 different kinds of cheese sauces, a shepherd's pie, and a goulash. So hope you're hungry because these recipes are really delicious. As a reminder, all of the content that we talk about in this class series is general nutrition information. Most folks can benefit from eating more whole plant foods, but if you have a specific health condition or were newly diagnosed with a specific health condition, it's always a good idea to check in with a registered dietitian and your doctor before making drastic changes to your nutrition plan. If you need help finding a registered dietitian, you can email us at that lifestylemedicine@trinity-health.org email. All right. So since not everyone has been with us for the last 5 months, I wanted to kind of level set and talk a little bit about some of the benefits of whole plant foods to make sure we're all on the same page when we're going through the recipes. First, it's probably helpful to understand what I mean when I say whole plant foods. And I'm really, when I use those words, I'm really thinking about foods like beans, lentils, whole grains, nuts and seeds, fruits and vegetables, food in the form that was as close to how it was grown at the farm or lightly processed. So if you think about the spectrum of foods that an apple can be included in, we can have a whole apple as a snack. We can make it into no sugar added applesauce, or we can take it and ship it to McDonald's and they can turn it into a hand pie. That's at one end of the spectrum, a highly processed food, and our apple is that whole plant food. So as close to that apple end of the spectrum as possible. We want to have a dietary pattern that's rich in those types of foods. Now, why we want to focus on those foods? There's a lot of misinformation out there, particularly right now when it comes to nutrition and the best foods for our bodies. But the science is abundantly clear that dietary patterns that include more plants increase longevity and decrease risk for chronic disease. And this is because plants, they have these awesome compounds, phytonutrients. Phyto means plant. So these compounds are only found in plants that help decrease inflammation in and of themselves. They also help turn on our body's anti-inflammatory pathways and turn on the pathways in our body that produce antioxidants, which are these protective compounds that prevent damage to our cells. They also contain those protective compounds themselves. We're going to talk a little bit about it on the next slide, but these plant foods are also really rich in fiber, which support a healthy gut microbiome, which is also linked to decreased risk for chronic disease. Now you can see the picture on the screen here. We've got a lot of bright colors and we have the rainbow represented here. So this is just to show and emphasize the fact that variety is key when we're thinking about any dietary pattern, specifically plant-based eating. Eating the rainbow is really important because each of these different colors corresponds to a different one of those phytonutrients that help promote health. So if we're eating the rainbow, we're making sure that we're covering all of our bases and we're getting the variety of different compounds our body needs to be its best. We like to challenge our patients to think about trying to get 30 different plant foods every week. Now, if that seems like a lot, totally fine. Maybe you start with 10 different foods. Again, start small and challenge yourself. You could also think about tracking how many different colors you eat every day and challenging yourself to get towards that Roy G. Biv, that rainbow every single day. Now, let's talk about fiber. This is something that our team of dietitians here really loves. Fiber is such an important compound. It's a type of carbohydrate that our body can't digest, and the only place we get it is in plant foods. It helps with satiety, so that feeling of fullness. It can help with regulating our blood sugar, balancing our cholesterol levels, decreasing risk for certain types of cancer, particularly colon cancer. And it is critical for our digestive health. So if we're eating a lot of fiber, our bowels are moving well, and we're going to have good poops, which, everybody likes. That fiber is also feeding the bacteria in our gut. So we're getting the right balance of the right types of good bacteria in our digestive system. And when we're feeding that bacteria and they're fermenting this fiber, they're producing compounds called short chain fatty acids that lower inflammation, support immune health, and ultimately help decrease risk for chronic disease. Now, most people in the United States get about 15 grams of fiber every day, and we want upwards of 25 grams of fiber every day if we're looking to prevent illness or manage illness. And if we're looking to prevent cancer, the American Institute for Cancer Research recommends getting at least 30 grams of fiber every day. So by eating all these plants and aiming for eating their rainbow in those 10 or 30 different plant foods every week, you're going to work your way towards meeting those fiber goals. Another benefit is planetary health. So animal agriculture contributes about 10 to 15% of global greenhouse gas emissions. And beef production uses about 10 times more water per pound than beans, which is a great plant protein source. So one really great way that we can decrease our own personal carbon footprint is by swapping out some of our animal-based proteins for plant-based proteins. So really, it's a win-win. It fuels our bodies and helps us prevent chronic disease, and it helps cool the planet so that we can enjoy our time together here longer. So this graphic, it kind of represents what I was talking about earlier with that apple to McDonald's apple pie spectrum, which I guess kind of reverse it. So apple pie to apple spectrum here. We've got the highly processed food plate on one side, or the SAD, standard American diet, and then we've got that whole food plate on the other side. Any step towards that whole food way of eating is positive and going to help promote health. It does not have to be all or nothing. Just start where you're at, and remember, small goals lead to habits and long-term change. So start small, like really small, something that you know that you can achieve, and build on that success, and be persistent and kind to yourself. And then celebrate any wins. Like if you tried a new food, if you made a new recipe, celebrate that and give yourself a pat on the back. That'll help maintain some positive momentum. Okay, so we know plants are important. How do we add more of them to our meals? One great way is starting with spices. So this is a really easy entry point. Spices are antioxidant and anti-inflammatory powerhouses, and they're where a lot of the flavor comes from in our plant-forward meals, and really in any meals. So thinking about some spices that you like, or maybe trying a new spice and adding it to your meals. Could it be turmeric in some scrambled eggs or a tofu scramble, adding some cinnamon to your breakfast porridge, paprika in a stew, etc. You can also think about meals where you use grains. So rice or a pasta, things like that. Can you swap that grain for a whole grain, which is going to be full of fiber and B vitamins? So can you swap white pasta for a whole grain pasta, or even a bean-based pasta? White bread for a truly whole grain bread? Things like quick oats for your rolled oats, or quick grits for stone ground cornmeal grits. You can also think about ways to sneak in more vegetables by pureeing them into sauces. You can add them to smoothies. Yes, vegetables work really well in smoothies, like spinach or riced cauliflower are really delicious. You can add them to baked goods like muffins or cookies. Really great zucchini cookie recipes out there. Pumpkin is a great use in baked goods too. You can even replace some of the fat. We'll talk about that in our baking class. You can add veggies to a scramble. If you're a scrambled egg person and you're not ready to, swap that out for maybe a scrambled tofu, can you at least add some veggies into that scramble? Top your breakfast porridge with vegetables. You can shred them into soups and stews. mash them. So root vegetables like rutabagas and parsnips work really well mashed with white potatoes. If you love potatoes, can you just change it up a little bit and get some different nutrients by mashing another veggie in there? And then if you're a sandwich eater or a wrap eater, can we sneak some sprouts or lettuce or sliced tomatoes or shredded carrot onto that sandwich and kind of up the plant power there? Finally, we can think about kind of swapping some of our protein out. So ground meat, some of the recipes that we're going to cook tonight utilize typically in ground meat, and we're going to swap in some different options here. So you could start, if you're a ground beef person, maybe you're switching to turkey or ground chicken, and you're shredding some carrots or shredding some zucchini in there to help add some additional moisture and flavor. Or maybe you're going half turkey and half lentils or mushrooms. The mushrooms are going to add some nice savoriness. Or you want to go full bore and you're swapping that ground meat 100% for brown lentils or a crumbled tempeh. And we'll talk through some of those things in our recipes. If you're a scrambled egg fan and you want to change it up with a plant-based option, firm tofu makes a great breakfast scramble, and you can watch our plant proteins class or go to that page on our class website for the recipe. Chicken is kind of a neutral flavor, so things like chickpeas, firm tofu, and tempeh are great substitutions in recipes because they all kind of take on the flavor of whatever it is, the sauce or spices that you're putting that with. Okay, so hopefully that gives you a few ideas when you're thinking about your recipes at home, the things that you love to eat, how you can maybe just add a little bit more veggie, maybe swap out a protein, or think about adding more spices or swapping in a whole grain instead of that processed grain. And we are going to move into the kitchen. Hello. And we're going to start cooking through a couple of our recipes. We're going to start with a shepherd's pie. And I'm very excited about this recipe. I think everybody in our office was very excited about how tasty this recipe is. So hopefully you give it a try, maybe when the temps cool down a little bit, because you do bake this in the oven. We are going to start in the saucepan over here. I'm going to come to the stove top. So you should be seeing some pots and pans. We are going to turn our pot here where you see my hand onto medium heat. I'm going to add a little bit of olive oil. I've got a tablespoon of olive oil. If you are looking to watch your fat intake, you could also add water here and do a water saute. But we've got a tablespoon of olive oil, and then I'm going to add my onions and garlic. I've got one medium onion that was diced. And if you haven't been with us, we have diced an onion in almost any of the other classes. So you can go back and watch any of those classes to see how we got there. And then I've got 2 cloves of garlic that were minced. Okay, and that's going in here. And we're just going to saute that for a couple minutes. And the onions and the garlic have these organosulfur compounds. It's what makes us cry when we cut them, that are really potent anti-inflammatory agents. There's some connection to reduce risk for cancer when we're eating alliums, so things in the onion and garlic family. So those are adding some really robust flavor and those really potent bioactive compounds as well. We're going to add some mushrooms, but I want to show you how I sliced them. This is a shepherd's pie, and we're making the filling with the onions and the garlic right now. And the mushrooms, we're adding about 4 ounces, so half of one of those packages that you see at the grocery store. You can use any type. The mushrooms are going to add some of that savoriness, that umami, if you remember from our flavors class, and they're going to add some nice texture. That umami and the texture all will help kind of mimic some meatiness in this dish, even though we're not using meat. So I'm going to put my camera down to the cutting board. You see I've got this one nice white button mushroom. I'm going to take the stem off just by putting my thumb on the outside of the mushroom and just kind of popping it with my thumb. Now, the reason I like to do that is because now I have this flat surface that my mushroom's not going to roll all over the place. I am going to slice my mushroom. Remember, holding a knife, I'm pinching it between my thumb, my first finger, wrapping my 3 fingers around that handle. I am going to put the tip of my chef knife on the cutting board, claw with my non-knife hand, and I'm just going to make kind of thin slices. And I'm doing a fine dice of these because I don't want huge pieces of my mushroom. I texturally want kind of small, uniform, almost square-like pieces. That's dice, and fine dice just means small. So roughly like that. I'm going to stack those slices again, slice it in half. Again, keep the tip of my chef's knife on the cutting board. And I'm just kind of rocking. That's the nice thing about the chef's knife. It's got this nice curved blade, so you can use that to rock back and forth. This motion, I've also heard it described, and I really like the description of, you could think about your knife holding hand as kind of holding a crank, and you're pulling that crank back towards you as you're slicing. I think that's kind of helpful. All right, we're gonna slice this head. There we go. Mushrooms are a really good source of soluble fiber, and that's the fiber that can help us with managing our cholesterol levels. See, I hear my onions. Let's go over to our onions. Okay, I'm going to turn the heat down. I had it on high. It's going to be on medium now. And I'm really just going and looking for the onions to start getting a little glassy. I want to make sure my garlic is not sticking and burning. And then I'm going to go ahead and add mushrooms. So we've got, like I said, this is 4 ounces of mushrooms that were diced. And those are going to reduce in size as they cook. Okay. And then I've got a 1/4 teaspoon of salt. You could skip that if you're watching your sodium intake. Totally fine to skip the salt here. And we'll talk about some other ways that you can lower the sodium content. Well, okay. Just gonna give that a stir. Let that cook for a second. While those cook, we are gonna make mashed potatoes. So one of my favorite parts of dishes like shepherd's pie, one of the reasons they're so cozy to me is the mashed potatoes. I'm a huge potato fan. So we're going to make our own mashed potatoes to go on top of this yummy filling that we're making on the stove. I've got, you can see here, I've got 3 pounds of Yukon Gold potatoes that were boiled. I put them in a pot of water. I put about an inch or so of water on top of them. You can see that they were cut in quarters to get about 1-inch pieces. And they were boiled until they were easily pierced with a fork. That, depending on the size of the pot and your stove, that could be anywhere from 20 minutes to 40 minutes. So I've got my potatoes that are well cooked. I've got 3 tablespoons of extra virgin olive oil. And I am just going to mash. I put about a 1/4 cup of the cooking liquid in here. So I drained the potatoes, and then I have a 1/4 cup of that cooking liquid. You could use a non-dairy milk instead of that to get some creaminess. I like the cooking liquid because you're getting some of the starch from the cooking water as well. And I think that adds to the creaminess I didn't have a container of milk already open, so then I didn't have to open it just for a 1/4 cup. And with this recipe, we want our potatoes to be nice and smooth. That's going to help with spreading them on top of our casserole dish once we have the filling done. So it doesn't have to be perfectly smooth, but we want it to be spreadable. So when you're mashing, if your potatoes are dry, you can just add a little bit more of the cooking liquid, or you could use that non-dairy milk. until you've got a fairly moist mixture that easily mashes. And I like the Yukon, you could use any potato here. I like the Yukon Gold. One, it's helping you get another color, right? You're getting a little bit of beta carotene in the yellow of the potatoes. And I think they really make a nice smooth type of starch they have. It's a very smooth mashed potato, and they are a little bit on the sweet side. So I think it complements some of the savoriness. Okay, so that's pretty good. I don't know if you can see kind of the consistency we've got going here. I think that's going to be nice and spreadable. I do have a little bit of salt I'm going to add in here as well and mash that. So let's check real quick on our onions and mushrooms. Those are looking good. You see how the mushrooms have cooked down a little bit and how the onions have changed from that bright white to kind of that glassy, more translucent color. That's exactly what we're going for. Okay, so we're gonna just mix in our salt. Again, you could skip that salt if you are trying to watch your sodium intake, or use half of what the recipe calls for. So you get a little bit of that flavor. Salt is just a flavor enhancer. You could also add some more of the spices that are in the filling to the mashed potatoes if you want that as well. All right, so I'm going to set aside our mashed potatoes and come back to them when we are ready to top our filling. Put that over here. They're just going to hang out in the background. And we are now going to add our remaining ingredients to our filling. So we have got 3.5 cups of cooked lentils. You can use dry lentils. You can cook them yourself. The recipe that you are going to find on the class website gives instructions for how to do that. You'll get a little bit more of a flavorful end result if you use the dry lentils, but it takes a lot longer to cook. So I wanted to show you a shortcut option as well, so you could decide what you had time for and wanted to do. So this is, we use 3 cans, right? Yeah, 3 cans of cooked lentils that were drained and rinsed. Okay, so those are going into our pot with our mushrooms and our garlic and our onion. We've got 1/2 cup of tomato sauce is going in there. You could opt for low sodium tomato sauce. I've got a couple tablespoons of tomato paste. Now, again, the tomatoes they're adding to the liquid, the sauciness of that filling. They're also adding that umami. Another umami or savory flavor addition is our coconut aminos. These are that low sodium alternative to soy sauce, fermented coconut nectar. A little bit also on the sweeter side too. So we're getting some slight sweetness without added sugar. A tablespoon of that. And then we have 1 teaspoon of dried thyme. If you're using fresh, use 2 teaspoons of thyme if you got that growing in your garden. Generally, that's the rule of thumb when it comes to our spices. If we're using dried, half of the amount of fresh. Okay, so I'm just mixing all of that together here. And I'm going to add in, we want this to be a little bit liquidier. So I'm going to add in about 1 cup of low sodium vegetable broth. And we might add more later, but 1 cup for now. Okay, and we're just going to let that cook for a little bit, let those flavors meld together. And I lied to you. I think I actually only used about 1/2 cup of veggie stock. So this is a good place to use your senses. So that's about the consistency that I'm looking for. If it dries out too much, I'll add more, but for now, that's good. Put the lid on. We're going to let those flavors meld, and then we will come back to that recipe in a moment. Can I get you to, yeah, thank you. Okay, so we are going to move on to our second recipe, a goulash. This is like kind of an Americanized version of a Hungarian dish. So we're going to move to this second pot where you see the lid is not on. And the first thing we're going to start with is some tempeh. So remember, this is an option we can use in place of ground meat. Often goulash has ground beef as the meat that's in it. Just gonna pull my ingredients closer to me. Hold on. All right. So this is how tempeh looks when you find it at the grocery store. This is one brand. It's not the only brand that's out there, or necessarily the brand that I recommend you have to use. A option. So it comes in, in this package, kind of vacuum sealed and in a block like this. Okay. Now to get it to look like ground beef or ground turkey, what we're going to do is crumble this and break it apart so that it looks more like this. Okay. So I'll just show you how I got there. Really, it's very simple. Just kind of mushing it apart as I go. Now, tempeh is made of soy. We're getting a lot of fiber when we're eating this soy protein. And that's one of the huge benefits of plant-based proteins is we're getting the protein and all of the benefits associated with protein, satiety and blood sugar regulation, and helping with muscle building and immune function. But we're also getting that fiber that we talked about as well. So it's another win-win opportunity here. And you're just crumbling it until it's the consistency that you feel like most represents the ground animal protein that you might be used to. This tempeh is fully cooked already, so you could eat it just like this. A lot of people find it a little bitter, so we're gonna steam it. And we're gonna do that by adding a little bit of water to our pan that's on the stove. Okay, so that's pretty good. We've got that mostly crumbled. We're going to this pan here. Make sure I got the right one on. I'm going to add about 1/4 cup of water into that pot. I'm going to add in my crumbled tempeh. Finish crumbling some pieces in there. So the steaming process is going to help reduce some of the bitterness on the tempeh, and it's going to also prepare it to absorb some of the flavors that we're going to be adding with our goulash. So next step of our recipe is to add in some veggies to that tempeh, and one of those is a green pepper. So I'm going to show you how we cut a green pepper. This is a green bell pepper. When I'm selecting a green bell pepper, I'm looking for ones that are firm. Okay, so if it's kind of soft and squishy, set that aside, leave it be, and opt for a nice, firm, dense, kind of heavy pepper. I'm going to lay the pepper on my side to cut it. Again, my pinching grip with my knife, claw with my non-knife hands. I'm going to slice off the top where the stem end is, and then I can just kind of pop out that stem. There we go. And I'm going to turn it over again, and I'm going to slice off these bumpy ends. Whenever we're cutting, we're always trying to get to kind of a stable surface that where our food product is not going to roll around on us. I'm going to cut the pepper so I'm avoiding this pith here and the seeds. To help with mess, I want to keep the pith and the seeds all together. So I'm going to slice from the top of the pepper down towards the cutting board at the edge where the flesh meets the white pith, and then turn it and make these kind of squared off cuts. Okay, and now I've got these nice, beautiful pieces that I can stack on top of each other, use my claw, and I can make these matchstick slices. Okay, I can gather those matchsticks together in an even pile and then cut the opposite direction. And this is, again, I'm dicing. So this is a small dice, more of a medium dice. That's a medium dice, I'll say. So roughly even kind of squared pieces is what I'm going for here. Okay, I'm going to do the next one, and then we'll check in on our tempeh and add. So the bell pepper, this is, you could use a red bell pepper or a yellow bell pepper here too if you wanted to. I just chose green this time, and that's how your recipe is written. But if you want to use a different one, that's fine too. And you can cut these as well. You don't have to throw them away. So you just make nice cuts. We're doing exactly the same thing. All right, very good. So we're going to add this into our tempeh now. It's been steaming for a couple minutes. Give that a nice little shake. A peek in on our. I'm going to turn down the heat on my shepherd's pie filling here. I really just want that to be lightly simmering. And where did my spatula go? Do this. Just give that a nice stir. Okay. All right, so our pepper is going into our pot with our tempeh. I'm going to turn the heat up on that a little bit. Go. And then I'm also going to be adding in, I've got 1 medium diced onion. That's going in there. And then I've got a couple tablespoons of olive oil as well. Again, if you want, you could add more water here and steam the all the veggies in the tempeh some more. The oil, I think, adds a little bit more flavor, and you are getting some beneficial polyphenols from the olive oil as well. All right, so that's going to go for a few minutes. And then we will add some mushrooms. So I'm going to check in on our goulash again. Give that a stir. Okay, so you can see it's kind of like we're not getting too much of the liquid gone. So that's good. I'm still liking that consistency. So we don't need to add any more of the broth at this point. I think that's pretty good. All right, let's go ahead and add in our garlic as well. So we've got 2 cloves of minced garlic right here. I'm going to show you how I got there. So this is my clove of garlic down here on my cutting board. So you can see, hopefully the shadow doesn't get in the way too much. And I've got my chef's knife. I'm going to make some nice thin slices. Just kind of gather those thin slices together. Go over it the opposite direction. Just kind of keep going over my pile. Mince is just really small pieces is what it means. And we do that for kind of very flavorful or pungent ingredients. I really love garlic, but I don't necessarily want to bite a whole clove when I am eating something as delicious as a goulash. I want that garlic flavor infused throughout the entire dish. And mincing is one way that we can do that. When you're mincing garlic, if you let it sit for about 10 minutes before you put it into your recipe, that's also going to help with developing some of those powerful compounds that help fight chronic disease, particularly with garlic allicin. There's a reaction that happens when there's some compounds exposed to oxygen, and they produce that allicin compound and increase the power of the garlic to help fight disease. So if you have time, let your garlic sit for about 10 minutes before you use it. All right, we're going to stir that all together. Beautiful. Looking good. Okay, and next we're going to add in our mushrooms. So I've got 1 cup of mushrooms, same style mushrooms, button mushrooms that we're adding into our goulash there. And give that a nice little stir. And then let's check on our shepherd's pie filling. All right, still, I'm just checking to make sure that it's not sticking. Because if it's starting to stick, that means I probably need to add a little bit more liquid, but we're doing okay. All right, we've got a few more ingredients into our goulash. We have got 1 can of tomato sauce. choose low sodium if that's something that you're looking to avoid. We've got 1 can of fire roasted tomatoes, and I'm using the liquid. So these are just like roasted, diced fire roasted tomatoes. The fire roasted is just going to add some smokiness to this dish, which is delicious. And I think particularly if we're used to eating meat in this kind of a dish, that smokiness can help add some of that kind of umami, savoriness that we might be used to. We've got 1 tablespoon of tomato paste. Again, that tomato are a great source of that savory, rich, earthy kind of umami flavor. So we're mixing that in. We've got a tablespoon of coconut aminos for more umami and a little bit of salt, but again, a lower sodium option than our typical soy sauce, which you could use in this application as well. You just might want to adjust some of the other sodium. We've got some oregano. We have, how much do we put in here of the oregano? I can't remember. Let me check my recipe. We've got 1.5 teaspoons of dried oregano, and we've got 1.5 teaspoons of dried basil going in here. And then we have 2 teaspoons of smoked paprika. Smoked paprika is a very Hungarian thing, and that the smoked of the paprika, if you can find smoked paprika, that's what I would recommend using here, because again, that smokiness is going to help add to kind of that depth of flavor and that umami savoriness that you might be missing if you're used to eating animal proteins. Okay, we are going to shift some things around here. I'm going to turn down my heat. So this is, you can see that's bubbling really intensely. That's a little too high for me. I want it to gently simmer. And we're just going to gently simmer this for a few minutes to help the flavors kind of meld together. And while that is happening, we are going to move on to another couple recipes. I'm going to turn that down some more because that's still, you know, and working with the electric stove tops can be a little bit challenging. They're not as quickly responsive. So, okay, I'm going to light that. I'm going to check on our, yeah, this is nicely bubbling. Starting to stick a little bit, but not still pretty liquidy. Good. Okay. All right. So nice. I'm going to add a little bit more liquid here to this because kind of our fun, I think the most fun process to me about the goulash is the fact that we're cooking pasta in this goulash. So get it back up. And I'm going to add, so you can see here, we've got 2 cups of elbow macaroni. That's about 8 ounces. Most packages in the grocery store are going to be about 12 or 16 ounces. So you're using about half of a typical box. So I'm just stirring that all in, and we are going to let that cook for a good 10 minutes. I'm going to add a little bit more liquid in here because the pasta is going to absorb some of that liquid. All right, give that a nice little stir. Okay, and then I'm just going to put the lid on that. I'm going to let that simmer for about 10 minutes until that pasta is cooked. And then we'll have goulash. So we'll check in on that in a second. But we are going to make some cheese sauce. So I think one thing that a lot of people miss when they choose to go plant-based is cheese. And I really like both of these recipes for cheese sauce. They're not cheese, but they're very delicious and they make really great macaroni and cheese or Alfredo. So the first one we are going to do, I have got plug in. We're going to use this food processor. If you don't have a food processor, you could use a blender if you've got one of those. I've got my food processor here. Show you that. And then I've got some cooked russet potatoes and a medium carrot. So it was one large russet potato like this, and we're using russet potatoes because these are very starchy, and we want to get a smooth kind of creamy sauce, and the starches in this russet potato help add to that smooth creaminess. And then I've got one medium carrot. So those were both washed, peeled, chopped into 1-inch pieces, and then boiled until they were really soft. So about 15 minutes. Okay, those are going in this food processor. And then I'm also adding in 3 tablespoons of olive oil, 2.5 tablespoons of nutritional yeast. Now, nutritional yeast is a deactivated yeast. You may find it in containers like this in the grocery store. It might be in your spice aisle. It's sometimes with the pasta sauces, but this is a really great tool for adding some cheesy savoriness. And then I've got a 1/4 teaspoon of mustard powder. So this is ground mustard seeds. Come sometimes in a package like this. That's going in here. That adds kind of a pungent kick. So sometimes cheese has kind of that bite to it. So that we're mimicking that with the mustard powder. I have got some vinegar, 1 teaspoon of white vinegar, and then a teaspoon of salt. Okay. And then what we're going to do is just kind of blend this all together until it's smooth. So bear with the noise for a second. I'm going to pulse this. And then it's starting, you could see the blender kind of starting to move a little bit there. And that means I need to add a little bit more hot water. So I've got some hot water here. I'm just going to add in a couple tablespoons. That's going to help keep everything moving. Starting to do that again. So I'm just going to add a little bit. And the hot water I'm using, you can see it's kind of cloudy. That's because it's the cooking liquid from the potatoes, and it has some of that starch in it that I want to keep in this dish. That's going to help kind of blend everything together. All right. So there is my cheese sauce. You can see it looks very much like a nacho cheese, and it's kind of got that gooey consistency. And that's all thanks to the power of starch in potatoes. And potatoes are so versatile. They're really great as well for thickening soups there where you might have typically used cream. You can often use potatoes to achieve some of the same kind of creaminess. I'm going to show you how you might use this. We've got some cooked pasta. So I opted for a bean-based pasta. This is a chickpea pasta for some more fiber and some more protein. Really, most people can't tell the difference between regular pasta. I've got some green peas in here as well for some added protein and fiber. And the green peas were frozen, and I just tossed them into the pasta cooking water for the last 30 seconds and then drained them with the pasta. So macaroni and cheese and peas was one of my favorite childhood dishes. We're going to take some of this cheese sauce and see if we can mimic that dish. I'm gonna add that on here. Okay, and then voila, you can toss that together to coat it, but you've got your macaroni and cheese and peas. Very delicious. We're gonna touch base with our stovetop for a second, just to check in on our goulash and our shepherd's pie to make sure nothing's sticking. Particularly with that pasta being added, I just want to make sure that nothing's sticking. Okay, perfect. So that's looking pretty good. And then our shepherd's pie. All right, we're starting to see some sticking. I'm going to add a little bit more of our veggie broth. Ooh, don't do that. Don't splatter yourself. I think going to add our last ingredient into our shepherd's pie before moving on to our last sauce. So our last ingredient for the shepherd's pie, this is just a bag of frozen mixed vegetables. We got peas, corn, carrot, green beans, very typical of what you see in a standard shepherd's pie recipe. This is a 12-ounce bag, 16-ounce bag. And we're just gonna pop that in there. Let that cook for a couple minutes. Give that a stir. And we're just cooking until they are no longer frozen. They're fully warmed all the way through, and they're taking on some of the flavor of the spices that we put in this dish. So that's about the consistency that we're going for our end product. For our end product of the filling. All right. Last but not least recipe, final cheese sauce. This is more of an Alfredo style cheese sauce, and really it's just because it's white. So you could add more nutritional yeast, or you could add some turmeric to this recipe if you wanted more of like a cheddar cheese style sauce. We have got this is some silken tofu. Oh, the light is pretty. Yeah. So this is half a block of silken tofu. We haven't drained it. We just put half of it on the plate here. That liquid is gonna come in handy. Trying to get that into our immersion blender base. Now you could again use a blender, or you could use that food processor for this. I just wanted to show a different tool. So this is the immersion blender base. This is the immersion blender. So this is where the motor is. This is where the blender blade is. It detaches. Sometimes there's different attachments, like a whisk or something for these. They're about 40, 45 bucks. So not horribly expensive, but a helpful investment for making sauces, salad dressings, or blending soups together. So I've got my half a block of silken tofu. Again, we're getting some good plant-based protein from that. I've got 2 tablespoons of olive oil, 1 tablespoon of olive oil, 2 tablespoons of nutritional yeast. I've got a 1/4 teaspoon of garlic, a 1/4 teaspoon of mustard powder, and a 1/4 teaspoon of salt. So you'll see some similar ingredients to what we just used with spice-wise for the other cheese sauce. And now I'm just going to blend this together with my immersion blender. Okay, beautiful. Now, you can see that's kind of like a pourable sauce. So it's slightly different consistency from what we were working with the macaroni and cheese. I'm going to show you what that looks like on our plate with our same pasta. There we go. And we're just going to pour some of this Alfredo sauce on top. Beautiful. You could throw some white pepper or black pepper in here as well. Sprinkle some parsley on top, and bon appetit. You've got a really beautiful pasta Alfredo. The silken tofu also works really great for adding creaminess to like a bisque, or it's really yummy in smoothies. I really like it with like raspberries or strawberries and some spinach thrown in there. So you're getting some protein in your smoothie. Very versatile. You can make a cheesecake with the tofu as well. Lots of options. All right, so we've made it through all of our recipes, but we still have a couple things to do in our last 5 minutes together, but we'll make it, I promise. So first and foremost, we are gonna turn off the heat on all of our pots here. Okay, I've got this beautiful filling for my shepherd's pie. And I've got this beautiful bubbling goulash. So believe it or not, the heat is off. It's just an electric stove. So we're just continuing. Go hot. I'm going to show you what this looks like plated in the bowl. So it's a little bit easier to see. Put a couple scoops in here. It's really nice, high protein with that tempeh. And we can, for a little bit of color and pizzazz, because we eat with our eyes, we can add some parsley on top of there for some beauty. This smells so good. I wish I could send smells through the computer to you, but that was so easy, and we have this really flavorful goulash. Now for our shepherd's pie, come back to our cutting board here. Flip this over again to our cutting board. And I am simply going to dump my filling into a 9x13 pan. Okay. Use the scraper to make sure I get everything in there. And I'm just gonna smooth the filling out evenly in this pan. And then turn off the stove. So now I'm gonna take that mashed potato filling. Now it's thickened up a little bit since we have made it. That's okay. You could add a little bit more liquid here if you want to, but I think it's still gonna spread fairly well. So our goal here, I just like to kind of divvy up the mashed potatoes, try to divvy it up fairly evenly. It does not have to be perfect, but your goal is to just kind of spread it around so you get a nice coverage on top of your lentil mixture here. We're making a crust essentially for this dish. And after we finish this, it's gonna go in the oven for about 10 minutes into a 425-degree oven, or until the top is nice and golden brown. Okay, so again, everything's fully cooked. We're just looking to develop some kind of crispiness on the top and some additional flavors. There's the Maillard reaction happens when we're in the oven roasting at that high temperature, and that reaction kind of creates some more savoriness and a little bit of sweetness in these potatoes. So it enhances the flavor, but you could also just eat it like this if you wanted to. A few more mashed potatoes. And if I didn't say it earlier, this was 3 pounds of Yukon Gold potatoes that was chopped up into those bite-sized pieces. So that's about what you need in order to cover this full 9x13 pan. All right, so there we go. It's fully covered. We put it in the oven. The only thing that looks different about this after it's cooked is just there will be some slight golden color on top of the potato. So just imagine that has happened. And then you want to let it cool for a few minutes before you enjoy it. This makes great leftovers. The flavors kind of meld together a little bit more. And another benefit that you get when when potatoes or starches like corn or rice cool down, this compound called resistant starch develops, and that is resistant to digestion. So our gut bacteria ferment it just like they do other fibers, and we get more of those short chain fatty acids, those beneficial compounds that I mentioned earlier, produced. So eating this as a leftover, you're getting even more benefits from it. Those are all of our recipes. I know we're right at 7:30, so you are welcome to leave. I just wanted to share a quick slide with some information about a new class that our team launched. So I'm going to pull that up. But if you need to leave for the evening, I totally don't blame you. But just bear with me 1 second. A reminder, if you're a colleague, please email Lifestyle Medicine and you'll get your points towards keeping your insurance premium low. But this is the class. My colleague Emily Haller is teaching this new lifestyle medicine approach for cancer survivors class. It's phenomenal. The content I've seen so far is wonderful. The group is really supportive. If you or someone you know has a cancer experience or you're caring for someone who is going through cancer and you would like to learn how lifestyle medicine can support them thriving through that experience, we have 2 more cohorts of this program coming up this year. You can see the dates on the screen there. You can call that number to register, and that short link on the bottom is where you can find out more information. If you still have questions after exploring that website or you have trouble connecting to it, again, you can always email us at that lifestylemedicine@trinity-health.org email, and we are more than happy to get you more information. All right, so that is our class this evening. Thank you so much for spending this hour with me cooking through some of your family favorite recipes. I'm really excited to hear from you on if you make these recipes, how you maybe tweaked them to make them your own, or if you took any of what we talked about with how to plantify or up the plant power of your other meals and you incorporate that throughout the week. So feel free to email me, shoot me a message. I always love hearing from you. And it doesn't look like we have any questions. So with that, I will say good night and happy cooking.